everybody.
Test.
How you doing? A little calm. Thank you all very much for having me back in this crazy city. I seem to spend a lot of time here. It's kind of funny. I met Paul's brother this weekend. I have the privilege of spending more time in Halifax these days because of my friend Tone Nuktagal and the guys at ACOA. But we have this opportunity to meet awesome Halifax and Atlantic region-based startups and do a workshop, and I get to come out and see my friends Jevin and Tone and run into family, apparently.
He's got all the hair.
You guys have met Mike? This is Paul, who I actually have never met in person, so for me this kind of, you have those moments where you run into founders that are have done really cool things and done some amazing things, and hopefully we'll get to talk about them. Everybody, please put your hands together and welcome everybody, and we'll get this going. Shall we sit?
Sure.
Let's see how this is. So I want to talk about fundraising. How many people in the room need financing? How many people want to raise capital? You know, this was supposed to get easier for me when I switched sides. I went from being on the rebellion to the Imperial forces.
The Death Star.
But everybody seems to think that they want to raise venture out of the gate. Did you guys raise venture as the first round of financing?
I raised seed. I went to the friends and family route, and we raised about $1.3 million in seed capital. Paul Gauthier was our initial investor too, so I think he's going to become a popular person on Twitter after this conference. And we weren't really, in the seed stage looking so much for, call it smart capital. We're very blessed to run into Paul. But we were just looking for product validation at that point, making sure that the idea that we had was actually gonna manifest itself. And then we did follow up with a venture cap round last summer for $5 million with Row Ventures and Novacore, and having a brain fart.
As long as you didn't end up with Chabra.
Vantage, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Jevin. Yeah. Hot lights up there.
You give them money and they forget.
Whatever, eh?
Cool.
Yeah. We got to move on and do something with it now.
Money's just as green.
I guess technically it's not giving you money; it's buying part of the company.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I think the concept of raising money was romanticized a long time ago, thanks to movies like The Social Network and whatnot, and even well before that. And the analogy I always like to use is that because of that validation, startups think that they can celebrate, they could post on Twitter or Facebook, etc. We got funded, we're successful. But the chef doesn't celebrate when he buys the ingredients.
Damien talks about this a lot, which is, congratulating an entrepreneur for raising money is like congratulating a chef for buying the ingredients.
Yeah, I went to the grocery store, picked out the shelf. So we didn't raise any money at all until we went to YC, until we had kind of a validated market opportunity, revenue, and customers. That's technically not true. Actually, Dennis Calvelman, who's now our board member, he was our first investor. He gave us $200,000 before we went. But that was on the back of the business we'd created, which essentially ended up being Vidyard, which was a content production company called Redwoods Media. And the need for the Vidyard platform came out of that. And so we had customers already on Vidyard because they had bought content from us, et cetera. So I think for first-time founders, it's almost impossible to raise money out of the gate without any kind of validation. And you'd be stupid to even try because you waste all your time when you should be actually out there talking to customers.
Mm-hmm. I just follow on to that point. I make it sound easy. I mean, we've been doing this for 4.5 years. I had the blessing of having a good, profitable company to work from, and we bring employees in, and we've got a gym and a slushy machine and a beer keg, and everyone's like, "Holy shit, you guys are balling!" But that's on the backs of another enterprise. We spent a lot of our own money, probably close to $1 million in our own capital, flying around and meeting as many people as we could, and to date, we don't bleed the company, though you raise your money. I remember in the early days of the kind of the dot-bomb, as soon as they got money, I remember meeting one founder in 2000, and he had a little Z4 BMW on his desk, and he said, as soon as I get my capital, I'm going to buy this car. And that's exactly what he did. The next week, the car was there. And I remember thinking at the time, that's a little strange, I don't think that happens as much anymore. People have become wise to their ways, but it's definitely a long slog, as we've been hearing over and over this morning.
We don't look down on people for buying fast cars. But
Good. That's good.
but you got to lease them. No comment?
Oh, no. I did exactly that, but I mean,
I
no
know
problem.
exactly. That's awesome. It's but still this power dynamic exists, right? Which is that entrepreneurs come out of the gate and they romanticize fundraising. We read about it on TechCrunch. Anybody read an article about people raising money on TechCrunch? And anybody ever used the argument of someone raised $60 million in TechCrunch? We're Canadian, so we're 1/10 the size. You should do a $6 million round. So why is it that you think that entrepreneurs, you know, have this romanticism or this fascination with raising capital?
Well, I mean, I still don't romanticize it. I remember when we raised our capital, I think it was last year at another one of these conferences, that we had actually come out and announced the raise, and, you know, big round of applause, and that's great. I mean, raising capital definitely allows you to add some fuel to the fire, provided you have a fire burning to begin with. And I think that's probably the bigger point. I've never really romanticized it. I think it's great, and yes, it affords opportunity and jobs for a short period of time. But it's so much more about what you're going to do with that capital and how it's going to deploy and create results that, you know, hopefully you don't have to look back and raise more again. But I never really understood it, and still don't to this day. I mean, I come from 25 years of running my own business, and it's very much, you know, B2B, and I'm very much used to earning capital, making money, you know, removing your costs, your overhead costs, and then seeing what profit lays behind. This whole startup world's a very new one for me, and I have a lot of baggage that I think is good and bad related to that. You know, the concept of spending $170,000 a month and having no revenue is absolutely mind-blowing for me, but I get it. I understand why. But it's very, very challenging as someone who's come from, you know, that industry to walk into this and think that you can just spend, you know, obsessively and whatnot. So I don't share that notion, but I know that it's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I felt claim to it as myself, and I think that announcing a fundraise is public validation. Obviously, all your friends, your family, everybody, again, as soon as you're successful, as soon as you announce funding, and same thing goes for everybody else who's announcing funding. TechCrunch, all these publications romanticize funding. What we always try to do, and what we've done ever since that first funding announcement, is talk about our customer acquisition. So, you know, Vidyard closes new accounts. We actually have a PR release firing out the barrel next week. That's 4 new big accounts that we've closed. And I think that's more validating. I mean, that's the validation you should be looking for. Without that validation, you're not going to ultimately be able to raise money. But it is definitely that checkbox that a lot of people look for. And you work so hard. You know, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and you invested so much time and energy. Having investors say, yeah, I'm in, is definitely an exciting thing. So
It doesn't all have to be venture. I know out here we see more and more startups funded by the amazing programs at ACOA. And you were talking about writing government grants. You know, where are some of the other sources, at least the sources with the least amount of friction early to find some of those other sources of capital?
Well, for us, we were not as hell bent on raising venture capital. It was really about finding money wherever you could. And in our seed round, it was basically people writing personal checks, and we took advantage of the equity tax credits and a few other ones that are out there. But we did raise some money with ACOA as well in the early days, and again, you'd be crazy not to take that money. It's no guarantee, no interest, and no equity, so it makes a lot of sense, and it helps at a very, I think, instrumental point in time when you're trying to prove your product. So we did that. Where the money came from after that, whether it was private equity or venture capital or the mega angels or whatever, we were fine with, and we talked to an awful lot of them. What it came down to for us in the end was having a partner that is going to be an awesome board member for us, and that's how we ended up. Thomas Rankin was just up here; he was on my board, and then sadly he left, and he's still got the meat hooks in his back. We didn't want to see him go, but he had to go do his own thing. And Jeff Grammer from Rowe and Paul Lee from Vantage have been incredible board members. So for us, it was really about who can help us, because you sit every single day, day in and day out, looking at the same people and your founders, and you're fighting and you're pushing and you're traveling all over the place. Last night I got home at 2 a.m. from Vancouver, and last week I was in Europe, and my 6-year-old daughter came to me and said, "Daddy, how was your trip?" I said, "Great." And she said, "Was Jay with you?" And now this was a trip with my wife and I at a conference out west. No, Jay was not with me, and I get it on Facebook. Your day husband is Jay. You spend an awful lot of time, with these people, and sometimes that skews your objectivity. And I think having a board that is arm's length, that can, knows enough about your business to be dangerous, that can help you kind of reset, reflect, and rejuvenate, has been a very, very powerful instrument for us. And very, very proud of the decision that we made to accept the people that we've had. So much more about the partnership than the money.
The question was around easy ways to raise capital other than venture. That was awesome, by the way.
I'm lost too, but
yeah,
it's a lack of coffee.
You
have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I know. I got to pee like a racehorse.
doing the pee sit?
Yeah, so for us, the sources of revenue we were going after, and we still call it other revenue, were government grants. The problem with government grants, and it's a good thing and a bad thing, is that they're hard to get when there is no other validation. The easiest money to close is money from paying customers. And I know I sound like a broken record, but I cannot emphasize that enough, because you go get customers, you go raise money, it gets much easier to get grants. So we kind of had two paths when we were fundraising. One was we could go to YC, but we're a B2B SaaS company, and that's not really a YC path. Or we've got some Dennis Calvin money, we've got some deferred shred credits, we're talking to IAF, and both paths led to funding, but having both paths ultimately led investors to us. But we already had about $100,000 in annual revenue at that point. And so it was very easy to kind of get behind. There was clearly some semblance of product market fit that we could scale upon. And so again, the easiest money to raise is the one from your customers. Don't forget that. The other problem with government grants, on that note, and maybe this is an opportunity for me to rant about this, but the problem is that they create an elephant graveyard of startups that should have died, but ultimately keep funding. The lights are still on. And in the US, you don't have that issue. Startups just fail. They run out of money. Sam Altman was in Waterloo. He's the new guy from YC, and he's, there's three reasons startup fails. No customers, obviously, no revenue, founder battles, or they run out of money. And that's a good thing, because you might have a million ideas, but if a grant is keeping you alive, it's keeping a pulse, keeping blood in your veins, then you're going to keep pounding out on the same shitty idea in perpetuity, when you could have failed and ultimately went on and started something else. And this isn't my first venture. There's a couple failed events in the graveyard. I didn't even know about government funding. So I think you got to be careful and never look a gift horse in the mouth. But balance out your grant application with your grant application process with some customer acquisition activities. Can't emphasize that enough.
How do you figure out with traction? Because this is that hard part. You've got a long sales cycle. Yours is a little shorter, but still very long. How do you figure out when it's working and when it's not working, if it's all about customer validation? And when do you double down on those signals?
Well, I should explain a little bit about what our business is, so what I'm about to say makes sense. I guess the best way to do this: how many people in this room have played a lottery product in the last year? Okay, how many? Keep your hands up. How many in the last month? Okay, so if you're looking around, there's 3 or 4. Hopefully your ventures go well. You're not going to finance it off lottery playing that fast. Let me ask another question. How many people in the room have played a casual game in the last week on your phone or your mobile, your iPad? So basically, the insight that we had while working with my agency with Atlantic Lottery was that people aren't playing lottery products anymore. It's a product fit for a generation above 50. Yet, you look at what's happening with casual gaming and it's exploding. We basically created casual games to reveal lottery moments, and then we license those games to lotteries all around the world. So I think most people in the room would get that, and our traction was a little different than probably, I think is very different than most startups that are in the room, where we have a very, very long life stage. When I looked at what was happening with companies like Blockbuster, and is it shocking for anybody in the room nowadays to see them not in business? Absolutely not, with the advent of broadband. And I think think you have to look at companies that or industries that are also suspect to dying on the vine as well, or have opportunity. And in the case of lotteries, they can sell products online, and they can probably do a much better job than they're doing with their bricks and mortar. So we looked at that as an opportunity. In the early days, we built a couple prototypes, and we went and showed a few lotteries, and they all went, yeah, this is great. And then we realized how fucking hard it is to integrate these amazing games into a platform where you've got back-end issues, security issues, prize payouts. I could go on and on and on. One of the big proof points for us was getting our fingernails dirty enough to know what that actually entailed and how we needed to hire and what games they were prepared to take. Our first product that we built was a product called a prize play, where your skill would influence the amount of payout that would come out of the game. And we were all excited about that. Spent 2 years building this and talked to a bunch of different customers at the point where we had some prototypes to show them. And they were all like, we would never buy those, ever. So we were thinking, oh yeah, we're dead. So we had to do some pivots in the midst of all of these points of traction. Nowadays, fast forward a year after we got our venture capital, we've got customers all over the world, and we're securing them. Now the life stage is they're going from zero revenue online to something online, and it's going to take a long while for them to do that. Plus, you got the issues around legislative issues and issues of where they can and can't sell these games online. So it's a very, very long lead time for us. But traction for us is, let me boil it down this way: if I make a phone call to a lottery, strangely in this business, there's only 154 of them in the world. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to get that phone call returned. And that in and of itself is very validating, because most of them are saying there's no innovation happening in our industry. We're really excited to hear what you have to say. We will come in and we'll show them the products. Then the issues become not about whether they want to take the products or not. It's that, it's in Senate right now. We're not allowed to do this stuff. We're going to walk before we crawl. We don't want to, we got to have responsible gaming pieces in place and make sure that not everyone's, selling their houses to reinvest in more gaming. So our points of traction are very, very technical. And then from a customer acquisition standpoint, we have to be incredibly patient. We're deploying in, 24 places right now, and that's not going to see a big windfall of cash for probably a few years until the industry matures. So we're looking for a lot of those as we go along.
Yeah, and for us, it was a function of other areas of the business that were growing. So Twitter followers, Facebook likes, web traffic, all the simplest core metrics of your business. If those things are growing, then there's a leading indicator that there's a market. And then the other aspect of it was obviously revenue growth, which I mentioned, in those early days was roughly 30% month over month. And then some kind of indication of what Dan said, which is, would your customers ultimately be very upset if your product went away tomorrow? And so through those customer conversations that we continuously had, we found out that a lot of our customers were essentially using the Vidyard dashboard as an operating system. They would sit in there all day, they'd watch their video campaigns go out, watch the leads come in and act on them, develop spreadsheets, and those are CMOs, and that helped us understand how they're using the product, which led to the marketing automation integration. So it's a very organic process, but we never at once really questioned whether or not this thing was going to fly, probably because we were spending so much time trying to make it fly. And I mean, that's the big difference. It's from a lot of companies. I think it's got to be an organic evolution.
You talked about something interesting I just want to pick up on, and that's kind of early stage marketing that I think most companies in this room, ourselves then included, would really struggle with. How when you have no money can you even think about marketing? And I think that became another KPI for us, that in an industry, how do we become a titan in a very short period of time, being the poster child for next generation digital relevance to an audience that's completely disconnected to something that's been around for thousands of years. And we chose a few options. Everyone's options are going to be different, but there is an opportunity for you to talk about your product without talking about your product. You can talk about your philosophies without actually telling them your corporate philosophy. You can represent that by how you embody your marketing. And I'll give you a couple examples to give you some context. So early in the days when we were an absolute nobody, Karma Gaming was not known in the industry whatsoever. We didn't have money to do those big sponsorship things that all of our gigantic competitors do, and they buy out the front page and back page of magazines. I'm sure you guys have all seen this, the same issues in your own businesses. we chose to do a couple different things. We zigged a little bit. We aggregated all the different news in gaming and in lottery and in legislation, and we chronicle every single week a news blast that goes out highlighting from all a variety of different sources news that's relevant to them. Now, none of that has to do with us. We don't use it to market ourselves, or we come up with a new game or we do all that. We're just bringing data, and we're creating counterpoints for discussions. Inside, there's 154 lotteries. We have 2,000 who have signed up on their own who get the news blast. Now that got reduced after we had our Canadian thing. I think we're down back to 1,200 now again, but we're going to rebuild again. But the open rates are 80%. People really, they dig it, and they love it as a service. They don't pay for it because they're used to paying for that stuff. So if you're willing to put the time in, we're already doing the scouring in the industry. Why don't you give that data back to your customers, and they'll appreciate that. The other thing that we do is white papers. So we publish white papers on a quarterly basis, which are controversial, to your point, very, very edgy, and they actually go to the heart of the main challenges, because we can uncover issues that the industry doesn't want to touch with a 50-foot pole because we're a nobody. And inside of that year, there's not a conference that we go to now that people aren't like, oh yeah, you guys are the karma guys. You bring it with the attitude, and you look at Ben, right? Everyone just wants to go and meet Ben. He's a great guy. He's full of energy. If you can bring that into the industry, I think you can really help to unlevel the playing field in a way that isn't buying people's attention. It's earning it.
Yeah, and I think ultimately on that point, people don't want to be sold to, they want to be educated. And the only thing you have as a young company or a founder of that company is the perspective that you're a thought leader and you're a visionary in that space. And so you've got something new and exciting that these big old companies don't have access to yet. And there's a reason why you're building it. And you're the young, innovative culture and brain that they don't ultimately have in their office. And so they're buying that ultimately. And so if that can come out through white papers and your content marketing initiatives, then you can't help but succeed.
The thing to be careful about, though, in all of that is, anyone can attest to this. Your business can keep you busy 24/7, but is it keeping you busy doing the right things? And the question, well, you'll have to answer at some point in your stage of growth. Are you an entrepreneur, or are you an employee to your company? Because there's a very big difference. And the people who show up every day and are cranking out emails and putting the ones and zeros up on the board, but they're not making phone calls to their customers, they're not finding time to do the right marketing, things to make themselves relevant to their customers. Really, I think you asked the question, what are you doing? And it's a great question. I think you've got to really be thoughtful about what it is that you're doing. Now, I'm saying that because marketing can consume you 24/7, and you might think that it's something that's really, really powerful. But if it's not, coupled with you out there meeting face-to-face your customers and seeing how they're responding to your products and letting them help define and shape what that ideal is, chances are you're not going to be around. You'll be one of the startups in the graveyard, and I think that's what this conference is trying to curb a little bit.
How early did you define your customer journey? That experience of the assumptions of where you thought they were going to come from all the way to how long you thought it was going to take to close?
I'd say we still don't fully know. I hope we never conclusively say we now understand our customer journey, because it changes so dynamically. And for us, our primary sales opportunity was to the marketer in a business. So the director of demand generation all the way up to the CMO were the people that were buying our tech. What we did understand early is that we cannot sell our technology to the video producer, because the video producer is going to default to platforms like Vimeo and YouTube, because it's what they know and what they use. The marketer is going to want to buy Vidyard. And that was kind of a big realization for us. It probably only happened like a year and a half ago, because we were just trying to sell to anybody with a pulse that looked like they had something to do with video at their company. Now the big transition is that we're starting to sell to salespeople. And so that's all about finding the appropriate channels. And there's still so many uncertainties in our sales model. But what we always do is we go out and find these uncertainties. We kind of cross the chasm into different markets, different opportunities, different accounts, different industries, et cetera. We have the core knowledge of who our buyer is in that marketing space. And most of our targeted marketing campaigns are to those individuals. And so I know exactly how much pipeline we can generate on a monthly basis based off of those activities. And then our CMO, Tyler Lassard, has a benchmark to grow how many leads are generated from those activities by 10% month over month. And that means that the BDRs, the business development reps, get 10% more leads, and the AEs can close 10% more business. And so that core function is there. And that's something that we call our revenue engine that we probably built within the last year or so, and has really been working well in the last 8 months. And then in the interim, I'm out exploring those kind of other opportunities. And the reason I do that is ultimately to stay interested, because what I find is as the company grows, you become less of a founder and more of a CEO. And that means you're managing people and processes and implementing cultural regulations and all these things that I never actually thought I'd need to do. But I still want to be out there talking to customers and innovating. And I think as soon as you stop doing that is when your company kind of ceases to be a startup and ceases to exist. So short answer is there's a part of the business that definitely is scalable and understood, but that didn't happen that long ago. But where I'm really interested in is what's next. And we're still trying to figure that out.
So Mike, earlier you were talking a lot about the tools that you use to track this and how they've changed over time from spreadsheet to Pardot.
Yeah.
What are the tools that you use to track your sales process and your lead funnel?
That is a really tough one. And I know there's a lot of Salesforce people in here, so I tried it. I found it very complex. No offense. It's very manual.
Dan told us to be offensive.
Very good. Well, then offense taken. Our lead process is a little different. There's 154 lotteries in the world, so of which only 40% of them are online today. So as you start narrowing the gap, those which can and can't take are certain types of games and all that kind of stuff. So our process can be much more manual, I think, than probably most of the startups are in the room. We track everything with Go Lean or Lean Kit, and we Excel spreadsheets, and just good note taking overall. It's not a big science or math for us.
Can you talk a little bit about the change?
Yeah. So we integrated with this platform called Eloqua, which is a marketing automation platform, on the advisory of a guy named Steve Woods, who's the CTO, Toronto-based company, went public on the NASDAQ in some year, headquartered in Silicon Valley after that, and then ultimately sold to Oracle for about $1 billion. And so that was kind of our entrance into marketing automation. I had no idea what it was until we integrated with that company. That was also the beginning of our success, was selling through that channel. So then we went and integrated with Marketo, we went and integrated with HubSpot, and then Salesforce bought this company called Pardot, and we had already integrated with Salesforce, so we thought, fuck, we might as well integrate with Pardot as well, which was a great decision given the integration we have with their CRM technologies and everything. So eventually we had to choose our own marketing automation platform, which was actually a tricky decision because we were partnered with so many. So today we actually have the JavaScript on our homepage for every single marketing automation platform because we don't want to piss anybody off, but we actually do use Pardot. And so we hired a guy who was working for a company called Verticurl, essentially reselling that technology to come in and build what we called our revenue engine. And so you hear this thing about growth hacking. For us, growth hacking is the revenue engine. And so we run campaigns, everything is tagged, everything is tracked. And so we can tell if someone comes to our website and is eating a sandwich, what was in that sandwich, ultimately. I'm just kidding. Jesus.
Tough crowd.
Yeah.
I got it.
Anyways.
I love coffee.
Yeah, and so what we do is a lead score builds over time, and then once that lead score hits a certain threshold, it pumps into the BDR team. That process is all managed with Pardot, but the key part of our customer journey is obviously video. And so video is the largest contributor to our process, and this is ultimately what our technology does. So if someone watches a video, we can actually see how much of that video they view. Our reps, when they have an MQL, they actually have a task that pops up in Salesforce that lets them know when someone is watching the video. And so when someone is watching a video, we will call them. We know they're on our site. We know they're engaged. If they make it past a certain threshold, I know it's Big Brother, but this is the future that we ultimately live in, they'll pick up the phone and call them. It's no longer a cold call. And that's a core part of our sales process. Since we have a 5-minute rule where if anybody comes in MQL, anybody touches anything on our website that would lift them above that level that we would qualify them as a lead, we pick up the phone and we have a conversation with them.
MQL, for everyone who doesn't know, is Marketing Qualified Lead.
I'm going to throw out acronyms, TLAs all over the place. Yeah. Anyways, I could go into so much more detail, but all that stuff gets managed through Salesforce. All the lead activity is recorded in Salesforce.
Did you run your funding process using marketing and marketing automation?
Yeah. Yep. Basically, I mean, so on the seed deal, on the seed stage, no. What I did there was basically drive around Silicon Valley like a cowboy with a bunch of blank term sheets and just meeting after meeting. I think I met about 100 people.
VCs just sign those?
No, not at all. I mean, 10% of the people I met invested in the company. And
Which is actually a pretty high number.
And we had 10 investors in our seed round, to give you a gauge on that. So
nice.
I just had a blank term sheet. It was a convertible note, no discount, and I just kind of changed the cap based on how I felt about the investor. I had no idea what a convertible note was. They would always ask, what's the discount? And I was like, I don't know what the fuck a discount is. I mean, why would I give you a discount? It sounds like a bad
off.
thing. So no discount.
Sign today,
on our
50%
Seaground.
off.
Yeah. Now, obviously, being an investor, I have a better understanding of what all these terms mean. But on the Series A, we definitely nurtured our investors. And my role as a founder kind of takes three categories. One is, are we being the most innovative company in our space? We're building really great tech. Are our customers happy? Are they buying it? What does our roadmap look like? Does it excite our customers? All that stuff I've been pounding into everybody's head today. The second one is, do we have the best talent to execute on that vision? So the best people. And these are like the really cliche startup-y things, but they are the most important. The third one is, do we have enough money to execute on 1 and 2? And so I am always fundraising, and I'm always meeting investors. That performance time graph I showed, why be a dot when you can be a line? And so I'm constantly meeting new partners, constantly filling in the story. And then we track what they do on the website. So if somebody comes along and is poking around on the team page, we can see that. And I get a task in Salesforce that notifies me that someone from Omer's is farting around on the website. Omer's ended up leading our Series A because I knew one of the partners was going to be an event called Techtoberfest, and I made sure to hit him up when he was good and drunk. So
I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Jeff Grammer.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was amazing. He
I
stood
won't-
up on the stage and he said, if anyone wants to, I want to hear everyone's story in here. I'll be at the bar. Buy me a beer. I left at that moment, went to the bar, got 2 beers, waited for him at the door. Yeah, I was a groupie. I handed him
Right
a beer
on.
and did the pitch. And drunk, there's something in that. You got to get some drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bubbly pops.
Most of us are actually just sort of, the business mullet and a liver.
Yeah.
No?
Business mullet. That's
You
awesome.
like it?
I had a mullet.
I did not have a
It all
mullet,
fell away.
but I'm wearing the business mullet, jeans and a blazer.
I respect it.
Oh, I get it now. Right on. Yeah. Good.
We've got 10 minutes left. We can go on about bad fashion choices, or I'm trying to think of what else.
Well, I mean, let me throw something out just on the heels of what you were talking about raising capital. We were, I think, a little more lucky than most. I mean, the typical story is that you're, on Sandhill Lane or whatever that road is, that you're running up
Road.
and doing the term sheet here to here to here. I didn't have to make a trip there. I did all of our financing, out of Halifax, and I think introduced Roe to Halifax. And I think at that point they hadn't made an investment. Now they've made several since. And I think that it goes to the power of the story. Now, I may not have met with a lot of VCs, but I can tell you I went through due diligence like the beast. So I'm a member of this organization called YPO. It's a collection of all the presidents across the world, and reached out through the M2M network and basically talked to anybody who had ever raised capital before. I met a guy in New York that was basically took me under his wing, and I can talk a little bit more about that, about customers that basically take emotional equity in your company. It's a very important thing. But he did, and he guided us through every single process of what to do, what not to do. He let us, pitch him. I think the preparation required for venture cap is far more significant than most would give credit for. I think most of us think we get a good pitch, we come up on the stage, and we pray to God that someone's going to call us, and that happens in a lot of cases. But I think controlling your own destiny and doing due diligence on which fund is at the appropriate life stage for us to take a look at doing a deal with, which investors understand something about our space because they've kind of been there, done that before. And then you reach out to them. And by the way, he gave me 3 bits of advice, and I'm probably going to forget. One was the best introduction you could possibly get is from a successful exit. So if you know somebody, take Jevon for example, he understands what your business is. The best introduction to another VC is going to come from someone that raised. Now I'll sort of jump around, but I got an email as I was sitting in the chair from Jeff Grammer this morning, and he asked me every time he sees me, have you seen anybody that's good? So since we've raised the capital, I have had 1 phone call from the venture cap crew. So people who are out there raising capital. I think you might be in the room, and I said I wasn't supposed to be here because I was supposed to be in Gibraltar, so I'm sorry that I am here. I canceled the trip, obviously, but one phone call in a year since we raised capital. And I have an investor who's saying, now look, my business isn't to understand your business. It's great if you do make a phone call. I'm happy to sit with you. But the point is, I went through due diligence of the beast when I was raising capital. I talked to anybody that had a pulse, that could tell me the horror stories of how to raise, what to do, what not to do, who to talk to, what not to say, how do they get paid. Damien from Omers will tell you a great story about the fact that most people that reach out to him have no idea how he gets paid. All that to say, there's a lot of due diligence that's required before you go out knocking on doors. They get thousands of phone calls in the course of the year, and everyone's got the next great thing. You have to find a way of getting in there and finding relevance in that conversation, and that only comes from a massive amount of research, due diligence, personal profiling, all that kind of stuff, which we did a lot of, and we raised off the first literally 3 or 4 that we had knocked on the doors of.
I haven't met anybody that's raised money off of a cold call to an investor, actually.
I don't know I've seen it done.
Most don't take them.
It's one of those, I freely steal Damien's slides, and with the tall silver-haired man over there, we tend to do a workshop here in town where we teach everybody how VCs make money and why you shouldn't take it, which either does really good at generating deal flow or probably not so much. Yeah. But the goal is to try to prepare, because I think most of us, like Mike, go through this. I remember the first time that we raised money for a company called Reactivity, and I had no idea. And I remember sitting on the board and signing what was a down round, going, oh, a down round, that sounds uncomfortable, and not really understanding as a founder what that really meant was that my equity, which was worth 12% of the company, as soon as I signed that, became worth less than 1%. It's like, in hindsight, it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But we needed the money to go do it. And it was just those, it's this figuring out who these, how this business works. And when, 15 years ago, there wasn't YC, and there wasn't, all of the work that Fred Wilson and guys have done to share what's going on and how this industry, Brad Feld, how this industry works. So while if there's one other book, I know that, Dan gave you a great list of books, but Brad Feld's Venture Deals is one of the most critical books I've ever read.
Yeah, I read that one.
So you've read 2 books now.
Yeah, I've probably read more than I let on, but...
How'd you make it through Waterloo Engineering?
It's actually a funny story. So our VP of engineering was my classmate, and he basically did all the work, and I presented it. And that's the way it's been ever since. I mean, we've been doing that for 10, 12 years. So that's how I got through. We would share books. Like, it was a gong show.
You laugh. That's actually if Jeff Grammer was here, I emailed him this morning to see if he was. He's not. If he were to say, what is the dynamic between Paul and Jay? So Jay's my other co-founder. We have such a crazy yin and yang. So I am the extrovert. He's the introvert. He basically does all of the detail work. He builds the white paper. He does the marketing, and I present it. I go to the conferences, and I present what he has built for me. Half the time, he's like mouthing to me in the audience that I'm getting a stat wrong or something. But I think in a company, at least the most successful ones I've ever seen, to have that yin and yang of somebody that is really, really good at sales and not afraid to pick up the phone and be the face of the company, versus somebody that's really good at being white in a dark room and getting pastier by the days go on, programming and doing all that kind of stuff. It's a very important dynamic. I find companies that that I have only either one or the other is maybe not such a good thing. You got people who are all sales and no product, or all people that are all product and no sales. So if you don't have that in your company or your prospective company, you might want to think about how you can add it.
Should we do some questions?
Yeah, and just one really quick thing further to that point. When we raised our seed round, we created a firewall, and so there was Devin, and we had hired a couple engineers. They were very focused on building the product. They did nothing other than build the product, and I was out fundraising. And so Devin and I would touch base once a day just to talk about the process and develop some strategy around those meetings. But it wasn't a whole company thing. And I was the only one who ever went to any of the investor meetings. And investors would be like, where's the rest of your team? And they're like, well, they're working. Because that's ultimately what's important here. And investors like that. I mean, that's validating. You don't need everybody to go. A lot of them hadn't even met Devin until very recently. So, I mean, he's kind of like...
I thought he was your imaginary friend.
Snuffleupagus.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any questions? Mr. Isfan.
A question around, so I run a mobile app company in the event space, so event apps, that sort of thing. We have been generating some revenue, semi-profitable, and we went.
What does semi-profitable
Yeah, I was
mean?
just wondering.
Well,
that.
basically,
Losing slightly less money.
Yeah.
we're looking to hire.
So not profitable. Sorry, I'm just, yeah. Okay.
We were when we raised the money.
Okay.
We raised the money to hire a sales team, take a dip, and
Yep.
come out the other side. We took it as a debt round because we were generating revenue, and we were able to service that debt. And so I'm curious to know what you guys think of that, whether you've experienced it before, whether you've looked at it. I think the results have been good, but any bump in the road means that you're using some of that money and paying the investors back rather than growing.
So you raised a round of venture debt?
It was debt, like
Okay.
angels,
Like credit card debt?
certain percentage, 9-month holiday on payments.
Not convertible?
Nope.
So you borrowed money. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way a lot of companies that are bootstrapped leverage debt at some point. And if you're, going to build a company where you invest revenue in growth versus invest a bunch of someone else's money and growth to grow very quickly, there's two different categories of companies, right? We've burnt cash since, the day we took venture money and understood that that was our path. And we're constantly looking at ways of burning more money to grow even faster. But if you're able to pay down that debt and grow off of revenue alone, like power to you, because you will always own 100% of that business. Mm-hmm. And you hear about all these bootstrap successes, and those guys are the ones that really do make the money. Mm-hmm. But it often takes 10, 15, or 20 years and can be a much more painful process from what I've seen.
Well said.
Other questions?
Doesn't government money, the grants, don't they have a lot of strings attached that kind of end up shaping the direction of your business rather than letting you do what you want to do? Well, that has been my experience. How have you?
Well, I can only speak to the ACOA piece. For us, we didn't take any other form of grant, and the ACOA debt is they've been incredible to work with. So if I already mentioned earlier, no equity, no interest, and no guarantees. So you can't find better money than that anywhere. But on top of that, very, very flexible to work with the entrepreneurs. So if you can't, meet certain payment dates, then they're able to kind of work around you. So we have not gone after grants. Because of the amount of time and energy and effort that goes into building the applications. Like if anyone's ever done it before, you'll probably only do it once, and either you're really good at it and you'll keep doing it, or you'll be like me and run the other way. So I don't really have a lot of commentary on how that would shape, but I've heard the same.
I would encourage you not to go down that path until you feel ready, until there's some sustainability there. And there's actually a company called MentorWorks that will only work with you once you're at that point. And that point is definitely a moving line. It's a gray line in the sand. But they will actually go and apply for grants for you. And then afterwards, you pay them for the application on that successful grant. And so we get some new hiring grants that are about $20,000 a pop for any new hire under 30 that has recently graduated from an accredited university in Ontario. And they take like $800 for a $20,000 grant. It's a bargain. But the other thing we did was we actually hired our CFO originally, who was at that point our VP of Finance, to pay for himself in grant applications so that he could do our books. And so he ended up, paying for himself. I mean, his ROI was like 2-to-1 his first year, just because he was focused on grants. And with respect to strings attached, I mean, it's all in the way you pitch the idea, but ultimately if your company's being successful and like it's going in a direction that isn't the direction that the grant was originally applied for, who's going to come in and take that money away from you? It's like the Prime Minister is going to ring you up. Be like, you're misusing these funds type
You
of
would
thing.
have used that as a press opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't worry about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's basically what I'm getting it down to. But take the money you can. Everybody's money is green.
This has been awesome. We've got a angry red light.
Cool.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you.